I have to ask through your experience, like how do you remain optimistic? I mean, just through every time you see another situation, and this is behind the cameras. This is when you're sitting with the families, you know, they've lost their son or daughter. Like, I mean, you know, you're doing that day after day after day.
You know, the reason I do remain optimistic is twofold. I think about my life. You know, I grew up in the government housing projects in a little town of Lumberton, North Carolina. Single mother, raised me and my two little brothers. And, you know, the statistics said that, hey, you're going to end up in a minimum wage job, or you're going to end up in prison, or you're going to end up dead. That's what the statistics said about me and every other little black boy growing up in Lumberton, North Carolina. And it was it was a very depressed community. But here I am. And so that tells you there's always hope. There's always a possibility. And so I think about that, and I think about my daughter and my two nephews who we raised as our own. And I look at them and I see all the optimism in their eyes and the hope. And I know that we can give them a better world, a better America. And that gives me hope. But the probably the more honest reason why I have hope is not based on me at all. It is based on what they tried to teach us in first year law school about precedent, that, you know, everything must be based on precedent. And I'm sure many of the listeners will remember first year law school where they were like, well, we don't care what you think, you got to base it on precedent. And because we have to have the rulings of today be based on the precedent and connected to the rulings of the past, so it can have a lot of logical connection to the rulings that we're going to have for the future. So they kept beating us across the head. Everything is precedent, precedent, precedent. But I didn't accept that now, Michael, because I understood if what they said were true, I would still be a slave, because the precedent set by the United States Supreme Court was that slavery was legal. And so I understood it completely. But I did understand, even though I disagree with them, what they were trying to teach us about precedent. And that was based on precedent. It's a likely indicator of what is to happen in the future. And so I think about the precedent of Black people in America. I think about how at the founding of this country, we were labeled 3/5 of a human being, of a citizen, and yet we overcame that. I think about the precedent of the Middle Passage. I mean, it's one of the worst genocidal episodes in the course of human history. I mean, how many people died? I mean, 2/3 were down the ship before they got to the American coast. But yet, we overcame that. Then I think of the precedent of the United States Supreme Court decision in Dred Scott, where they said there were no rights that a Black man had that a white man was bound to respect. Well, we overcame that. I think about the precedent of after the Civil War and Reconstruction and the carpetbaggers and the rise of the Ku Klux Klan. You know, we overcame that. I think about the precedent of the Supreme Court decision in Plessy v. Ferguson, separate but equal, when it was anything but equal. And, you know, we overcame all of those poll taxes and all the other things and the impediments to equality. We overcame that. Then I think about the precedent of how black people overcame Jim Crow in the early 1900s, and then in the mid 1900s, in the 40s, 50s, all the way up to today, how black people overcame Jim Crow Jr., Esquire, PhD, wearing different kind of costumes versus hoods and with burning crosses at night. So what that tells me, Michael, is based on the precedent of black people in America, that whatever the enemies of equality throw at us, we gonna overcome it. We gonna be all right. And that's what gives me encouragement. I know there's nothing that they can do to stop us from overcoming the discrimination, the bias, and the racism.